Good evening, I'm William Brangham. Jeff Bennett and Amna Nawaz are away. On the NewsHour tonight, the House Ethics Committee report on former Congressman Matt Gaetz. President-elect Trump's first pick for Attorney General reveals alleged rampant illegal sexual misconduct and drug use. President Biden commutes the sentences of 37 of the 40 people on federal death row to life without parole, just weeks before Trump is set to take office. And China's foreign adoption ban leaves hundreds of children and families in limbo and brings into focus the effects of China's longtime policies.
I still struggle with a lot of aspects of my adoption and the grief and the trauma that comes with being separated from your birth country, from your birth family.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions, and friends of the NewsHour, including Leonard and Norma Chlorfine, and the Judy and Peter Bloom Kovler Foundation. The William and Flora Hewlett Foundation, for more than 50 years advancing ideas and supporting institutions to promote a better world, at hewlett.org. And with the ongoing support of these individuals and institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to the NewsHour. A highly anticipated House Ethics Committee report details a litany of allegations against the former Republican representative from Florida, Matt Gaetz. Prosecutors previously declined to charge him, but Gaetz's former peers found evidence that he paid several young women for sex, including an underage girl, and partook in numerous drug-fueled sex parties. Lisa Desjardins spent the day combing through this report about the one-time Trump nominee for Attorney General, and she joins us now. Lisa, this is a very explicit report, and we should just alert our viewers that this is what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes is somewhat graphic. In this report, what really stood out to you?
Right. Well, this contains very serious allegations and conclusions, very direct conclusions, according to the committee, that Gaetz violated law in a criminal way. So let's look at some of the main conclusions here. First of all, they found that over the course of nearly 4 years, the committee found that Gaetz paid tens of thousands of dollars to women, likely, they write, in connection with or for sex and drugs. They found that he had sex with a 17-year-old girl, and according to the committee, that fits Florida's definition, where this activity was alleged to happen, of statutory rape. Now, I also want to point out that the committee concluded that there is not evidence that he violated sex trafficking laws. In this report, there is direct testimony from witnesses, including the women involved, but also a very large number of text messages either from Gaetz or naming him in conversations with women. Now, it's important to say the women in these conversations have said that this activity was consensual. This is not an allegation of assault. This instead is about paying for sex. And the allegation of such statutory rape, the committee also goes out of its way to say there's no evidence that Gaetz knew that this girl was 17. However, they point out, according to them, under Florida law, that ignorance of a minor's age is not something that exonerates you. So overall, this is a picture from the committee's view of a member of Congress who spent years illegally paying for sex and for drugs.
Gaetz fought very hard to stop this report from ever coming out. What has his response been now that these allegations are out there?
He's adamant that this is a politically driven attack on him, and he has gone even farther. He's pointed out that the Department of Justice has never charged him with a crime, and he says that the committee is taking testimony out of context. His argument, as he put it here on Twitter, you see right there, is he says, I never paid anyone for sex because they weren't charging me. I gave the money essentially as a gift to these women. I don't know how that would stand up in court, but that is his argument here. The committee has said that, in fact, he did this, gave money to these women after having sex with them many times. Now, Gaetz is also trying to sue. He tried to block this report. He said the committee doesn't have a right to release it now that he's out of Congress. But at least one Republican, maybe more, and one Democrat on the committee voted to release it. It's rare to do this, but it is not unprecedented.
I mean, as you said, Lisa, Gaetz is out of Congress. He is withdrawn as President-elect Trump's nominee for Attorney General. So why are we even paying attention to this?
Because he's still in Trump's inner circle, and he hopes to hold political power still in the future. That includes potentially Florida governor, maybe some positions that don't need Senate approval. And also, this is a matter of transparency, an idea that Congress still is an opaque place where we don't really know about the ethical debates it holds.
One last separate question. What is happening with Representative Kay Granger?
That's right. The Texas Congresswoman has been in office for 27 years. I've covered her. She's a Spitfire, a pioneer for Republican women. But over the weekend, a Dallas newspaper came out with a story that for months, apparently, she has been, unbeknownst to many of us, in a long-term care facility. Her son has now said she has issues with dementia. As I said, no one wanted her to see this kind of decline, but she had a powerful position. And this is another example where constituents just don't know what's happening with their members. Some constituents saying they haven't received services. She does complete her 27 years in office next week.
Lisa Desjardins, thank you.
You're welcome.
In one of the most significant moves against capital punishment, President Joe Biden has commuted the sentence of 37 of the 40 prisoners on federal death row. They will stay in prison for life, but will not be subject to execution. Biden's move is believed to have been driven in part by the incoming Trump administration and an expected hardline policy shift on federal executions. Following all this closely is Robin Marr. She's the executive director of the nonpartisan Death Penalty Information Center. Robin Marr, so nice to have you here.
It's great to be here.
This is a pretty significant move. I mean, one of the most significant by a president with regards to federal death row inmates. What do these commutations mean for death penalty cases overall?
Well, you're right. This is an historic decision. This is the largest mass clemency grant of death-sentenced people by any U.S. president since Lincoln, and the first in the modern death penalty era. You know, there are 40 people on death row. 37 of them now will receive new sentences of life without the possibility of parole. And of course, there are about 2,100 people on state death rows throughout the country whose death sentences will not be affected by this decision. But, you know, part of the motivation for President Biden today was recognizing the racial bias and the unfairness in some of these federal death sentences. And many of those criticisms ring true for the men and women on state death rows as well.
Who are those 37? Broadly speaking, I know it's a big group, but roughly speaking, who are those people whose sentences were commuted today?
Yeah, all of the men who will benefit from President Biden's decision today were sentenced to death decades ago, really in a very different era in our nation's history. This was a time of overzealous prosecutions and very harsh criminal justice penalties and policies that sent dozens of people to federal death rows for crimes they would not be federally prosecuted for today. So a very, very different time. And, you know, the Department of Justice has recently looked at these policies and made some real changes to its prosecution policies, but none of those changes benefited the men on the federal death row. So that's why President Biden needed to make the decision he made today.
As I said, it's almost all, 37 of 40. That leaves 3 behind. Who are those 3 that did not get their sentences commuted?
Yeah, the 3 that did not get sentencing relief today were convicted of federal hate crimes or terrorism offenses. And they include Dzhokhar Tsarnaev, who was convicted of the Boston Marathon bombing, Dylan Roof, who was convicted of the hate crime of shooting in the Charleston church many years ago, and most recently Robert Bowers, who was convicted of targeting people at a Pittsburgh synagogue. All 3 of those men were convicted of crimes within the last 10 years. All 3 of them will remain on death row. The remaining 37 men will never be released from federal prison, but they will not be executed.
As you well know, President Biden has a very complicated history with the criminal justice system. He was principally responsible for the infamous crime bill back in the 1990s that many critics have said led to mass incarceration. He wanted to do more on the death penalty during his administration, but was not able to until today. Today he said this. I just want to read a quote that he said. I am more convinced than ever that we must stop the use of the death penalty at the federal level. In good conscience, I cannot stand back and let a new administration resume executions that I halted. Is that your sense that that's principally what's driving this?
Yeah, well, President Biden was once a very strong supporter of the death penalty, but his change of heart about this really began several years ago during the 2020 presidential campaign. You'll remember at that time we had just come out of this breathtaking execution spree where President Trump executed 12 men and one woman in just 6 months' time. So we were still reeling from that event, and I think he recognized at that point that the federal death penalty deserved his closer examination. I think he's looked at his conscience. I think he's looked at his own faith, and he most especially listened to the calls of many thousands of people who were asking him to make that decision, most important of which were victims' family members, some of whom had lost loved ones to the men on the federal death row, crimes they committed, which was really incredibly powerful.
I know we can't predict what a future president would do, but is it your sense that when President Trump returns to the White House, that he would take up federal executions? Meaning, does it make sense in some way that Biden took this step today?
Well, I think some of what motivated President Biden was the urgency of this moment and the danger that those men were in. President Trump has promised to use the federal death penalty, to expand its use, and to resume federal executions. But what I hope is that this President Trump will not just simply repeat the mistakes of the past. You know, as President Biden has shown us today, we can all learn from our mistakes and make better decisions in the future, and that's what I'm hoping for.
All right, Robin Marr of the Death Penalty Information Center, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
In the day's other headlines, the man accused of gunning down the chief executive of United Healthcare pleaded not guilty to multiple state charges of murder, including as an act of terrorism. In Manhattan this morning, the shackled Luigi Mangione was escorted into New York State's Supreme Court for his arraignment. After he gave his plea, one of his attorneys expressed concern about a fair trial amid a, quote, choreographed media spectacle, and as a separate federal case unfolds at the same time.
He's a young man, and he is being treated like a human ping pong ball between two warring jurisdictions here. These federal and state prosecutors are coordinating with one another, but at the expense of him. They have conflicting theories in their indictments.
His next appearance in state court is set for February. Also in New York, a man is facing murder and arson charges for allegedly setting a woman on fire and watching her burn to death inside a subway car over the weekend. Police identified the suspect as Sebastian Zepeda, a Guatemalan citizen who entered the U.S. illegally twice. He was arrested hours after the incident. The city's police commissioner called it, quote, one of the most depraved crimes one person could possibly commit against another human being. Former President Bill Clinton is hospitalized in Washington, D.C., we learned this afternoon. A staff member to Mr. Clinton said he'd developed a fever and that he was admitted for tests. His staff says he remains in good spirits. Turning overseas, Israel's prime minister says there has been some progress in Gaza ceasefire negotiations. A new bid to reach a deal has gained momentum this month. But officials familiar with the talks say sticking points remain, including which Palestinian prisoners would be released and how long a ceasefire would last. Speaking to lawmakers, Benjamin Netanyahu couldn't say when they might reach a possible deal, but claimed Israel's military successes had led Hamas to soften its demands.
I want to tell you cautiously that there is certain progress. I don't know how long it will take. We will continue to operate in any way and without a pause until we bring the hostages back home.
On the ground in Gaza, medics say Israeli airstrikes overnight killed at least 20 people. One attack hit a tent camp in a coastal area that Israel had designated as a safe zone. A local hospital said 2 children were among those killed. Automakers Nissan and Honda want to join forces and today announced plans to work towards a merger. If approved, their unification would create the third largest automaker in the world based on sales. The Japanese companies will begin official discussions, and Mitsubishi Motors, a partner of Nissan, will also join the talks. They hope to reach a formal agreement by June and to complete the deal by late summer of 2026. The short holiday week on Wall Street began on a high note. The Dow Jones rose by more than 60 points. The Nasdaq made the biggest gain of the day, almost 1%, and the S&P 500 also rose nearly 0.75%. And one of the world's most active volcanoes is at it again. Kilauea on Hawaii's Big Island began bubbling with lava early this morning, its third eruption in just the last half year. Hawaii's Volcano Observatory says it's confined to a remote, closed area of the state's Volcanoes National Park. But there is a threat for homes that are downwind because volcanic gases can be harmful for people with respiratory issues. Still to come on the NewsHour, the debates surrounding the health of right whales as offshore wind farms grow. Amy Walter and Tamara Keith break down the latest political headlines. And threading music through life, jazz trumpeter Arturo Sandoval's journey from Cuba to international success.
This is the PBS NewsHour from the David M. Rubenstein Studio at WETA in Washington and in the West from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism at Arizona State University.
The Biden administration just approved a wind farm project off the coast of Massachusetts. It's now the 11th commercial-scale wind project of its kind to get such approval. This comes at a key moment for this sector because President-elect Trump has been a frequent critic. As science correspondent Miles O'Brien reports, researchers are racing to answer important questions about the potential unintended consequences of this promising form of renewable energy, even while current windmills are under construction.
3 decades after the idea was pioneered in Europe, offshore wind power is just over the horizon in the U.S. In New Bedford, Massachusetts, they are staging and stacking the pieces of the largest one yet, Vineyard Wind 1.
What is the total dollar figure for Vineyard Wind?
So we are about $4 billion.
Klaus Moeller is the CEO.
It's in the high end because we have a lot of first-time investments here, but it's not off the charts of what we've done before.
Vineyard Wind is one of about a half-dozen utility-scale projects at various stages of completion along the East Coast, from here down to Virginia. The Biden administration set a national target of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind capacity by 2030. It would be enough to supply about 11 million homes each year.
What is the huge advantage to putting them offshore?
Here in Massachusetts, you don't see a lot of space just available to do onshore wind. Our wind farm is gonna produce wind for 400,000 houses in Massachusetts. That would be very difficult to achieve with an onshore wind farm.
These giant offshore wind turbines are twice the height of those built on land. Their blades are twice as long. That bigger sweep, combined with stronger wind speeds this far from land, allows them to generate more energy. Inside the turbine, magnets rotate past coils of wire, generating electricity, which runs down through buried wires back to the grid. Electricity out of thin air. Big as they are, the windmills are 15 miles offshore, too far to see from terra firma.
Cessna 808, clear for takeoff on runway 5.
So photographer Rob Gorley and I flew out to take a look.
Providence 95808, we're going to do some photo work at the wind turbines out there, requesting flight following.
We flew due south of Martha's Vineyard, and there they were. You can't miss them.
The size of these turbines is pretty stunning. Each of those blades is more than a football field, so combined it's 2 football fields in diameter. Plus it's sitting up pretty high as it is.
It was a very calm day in June, so they were idle. They remain idle now after a manufacturing flaw caused the structural failure of a blade in July. Debris fell into the ocean, leading to some beach closures. The blade was manufactured by GE Vernova, which blames insufficient bonding during production at its facility in Gaspé, Canada. The company says it is inspecting the approximately 150 offshore wind blades produced at that plant to ensure no similar defects are present. Construction has resumed, but it gave offshore wind farm opponents more grist for their mill. Over the years, Donald Trump has led the chorus, trashing turbines since at least 2006, when a proposal to build windmills near his golf course in Scotland first surfaced.
It's like a graveyard for birds.
Onshore monopole windmills kill as many as 328,000 birds a year in the U.S. For comparison, buildings kill 1 billion birds. There is no data on the threat posed by remote offshore wind. But many wind opponents are more focused below the surface, on whale mortalities.
Wind turbines that appear to be killing large numbers of whales.
Well, these should do studies to see what's killing the darn whales.
But these whales died before a single turbine was built in the supposedly culpable wind farm.
So that link doesn't seem real to me. It seems like false information.
Jessica Redfern is a quantitative ecologist at the New England Aquarium. She uses mathematics to study ecological questions, and the arithmetic for North Atlantic right whales is not good. There are only 370 left. They're being killed at an alarming rate by vessel strikes and entanglement with fishing gear, not by windmills. Still, she is concerned that the noise and additional ship traffic during construction might harm the animals.
You can think of it as a giant experiment that's occurring in our ocean. You need to observe, you need to collect the data, you need to watch to understand what's happening. From that you learn, and that's how we'll be able to really responsibly develop wind going forward.
The process of putting all that structure in the water is, of course, disruptive. Thousands of turbines require hundreds of thousands of bone-jarring impacts from pile driving. Groton, Connecticut-based Thayer Mahan is deploying so-called bubble curtains around the pile-driving operations. The concentric walls of bubbles significantly reduce the noise in the water column. The company is also deploying autonomous acoustic sensors that can detect the sound of vocalizing whales. Mike Connor is Thayer Mahan's founder.
What you have here is these are all sensors. These points, is that right? Is that how it is?
That's right. Each of those points is a sensor, and then these are the bearings from which we hear whale activity.
When a whale is spotted near a wind turbine construction site, the work is supposed to stop immediately.
Based on what you know here, can we say categorically that wind turbines have not killed a whale?
A wind turbine has not killed a whale. Pile driving from wind turbine construction has almost certainly not ever killed a whale.
But what happens after the wind farms are completed? Could they pose a long-term threat to the whales? Heidi Sosik is conducting research that might provide an answer. She is a biological oceanographer at the Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution, 25 miles as the crow flies from the Vineyard Wind Farm.
Part of what's so fascinating about trying to study the ocean is the challenges that we face in trying to observe it. I mean, it's just captivating for me.
She's in the middle of a multi-decade study to better understand what's happening in the microscopic sea. 4 times a year for the past 6 years, she and her team have steamed from Martha's Vineyard due south across the continental shelf and just over the edge, all the while recording, counting, identifying all manner of phytoplankton with automated high-speed imaging. The tiny copepods that right whales depend on are themselves dependent on the phytoplankton, a kaleidoscope of microscopic algae that thrive in the ocean. She suspects all those windmill structures in the water will perturb the ocean circulation and cause turbulence affecting how and where the plankton grow.
At the bottom of the ledger, it's worth continuing the construction in your view?
The wind farms are going in, and we can't turn back the clock on that. So we need to move forward with the research to make the best decisions we can going forward.
Heidi Sosik lives in a solar-powered home and drives an electric car. She is personally invested in fighting the climate emergency. She's among many scientists willing to accept the risk of offshore wind so long as it is well measured. For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Miles O'Brien in New Bedford, Massachusetts.
In his next report, Miles looks at how offshore wind power may complicate fishing and seafood harvesting for one of the country's most lucrative fishing ports. President Biden makes a big decision with just weeks left in office, and with Republicans set to take power, a funding fight reveals potential cracks in the GOP. It is a perfect time for a Politics Monday duo. That's Amy Walter of the Cook Political Report with Amy Walter and Tamara Keith of NPR. Welcome to you both. Tam, sorry we couldn't have you sitting here with us. But starting with you, Tam, I mean, Biden is near the end of his term. As he has with his entire political career, he's been going all out on this legal front. The commutations we saw today, following thousands of others before that, pushing a lot of judges through to confirmation. How much of this is just normal end of term, end of political career, tidying up, and how much of this is eyeing the incoming administration?
Well, certainly, President Biden was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee for a significant part of his career. And he, as soon as he came into office, had his eye on these judicial positions. When President Trump was in office, he set a near record with the number of nominees that he was able to get to confirm to lifetime positions. And that really shaped the court and in a way, helped shape the Biden presidency, because there were times where policies he wanted came up against Trump-appointed judges. Well, now Biden has beaten Trump's number of these lifetime appointments, and those nominees, those appointments, those judges will then shape the legal opinions that go forward, the legal opinions that will affect the Trump presidency, at least partially. As far as the pardons and commutations, the announcement today is essentially Biden trying to do criminal justice reform to change federal policy by way of the power that he does have, which is that power of pardons and commutations.
Right. I mean, Amy, what do you make of all of this activity?
In the power that he wanted to have through the legislative process, right? He wanted
and was denied.
And was denied that. And so we've talked a lot about this incoming president and what he can and cannot do with the legislative body that he has. But it's just a reminder of how much you can do as executive, even though it is not changing the law permanently. You know, the interesting thing in looking at these last few months here, or last few weeks especially, of the Biden administration is the thinking through the man and what his legacy will be. And we've had pretty young presidents in these last era who were able to watch their legacy change over the period of time while they were still alive, our interpretations of their legacy. This is not a man who will be alive to see that. And so what he seems to be doing is putting in place things that he wants that others will be able to make that determination about what his presidency was or wasn't. And he's just going to go out doing the things that he had said he wanted to do when he was running for president. One of those, lifting the death penalty. And as again, complicated legacy, but as a Catholic, I think this was one of those tenets that he had stood by pretty consistently, always stuck with that.
Right. Tam, this week, as you saw, we had this pretty shocking turn of events with this government funding deal pulled from the brink of disaster at the very, very last minute, but not before Trump and his able lieutenant, Elon Musk, torpedoed the first one, tried to get a second one to their liking passed, which then engendered this revolt within the GOP and showed some fissures in the incoming president's prowess. What do you make of all of that, how that turned out and what it revealed?
one thing that I think we've talked about before is that President Trump will come in a lame duck. That is, his term is only going to last 4 years. And when he's gone, and it's only going to last 4 years, and after 2 years or so, people are going to be running for office. He's coming in with this narrow, like as narrow as you can get, House majority, and has really, really ambitious goals. And so what he was trying to do by blowing up that initial deal and then trying to get something else, and then the conservatives revolted, what he was trying to do was sort of smooth the path for his ambitious legislative and an executive agenda. What became clear this week is that that path is not going to be smooth for any number of reasons. One is that House Republicans and even Senate Republicans are not a monolith, and they aren't necessarily going to do exactly what he wants and exactly the way he wants it. And also, he has sort of returned to form. He certainly had help from Elon Musk, who was stoking concerns about that deal, that bipartisan deal online. But Trump returned to form, which is even when his party controlled both the House and the Senate, he actually blew up a deal that they had amongst themselves back when he was president that led to a government shutdown. And so this sort of chaos that was experienced in the last week, I don't think that's the last time we're going to see it.
Yeah, and I do. I think that was really an important point. It's not just that he has the narrowest of margins. Remember, there were more than 30 Republicans who voted against this. So even with a larger majority, this would not have been able to pass just on Republican votes alone. And the point about that Tam made about, the first 2 years being critical, that's absolutely right. It's not just that people start running for president 2 years from now. It's that there's a midterm election, and the odds that that party in power holds on to both the House and the Senate, the Senate is much harder to flip, but the House, that could be very difficult for Republicans to hold on to once again. So there is a very narrow window if the Republicans are going to pass this very ambitious agenda, even one that just tackles taxes and the border, which is what the president has sort of put on the top of his priority list. Now, it may look different when he's the president. Republicans are in charge of the Senate, and so the pressure is a little bit different on these individual members of Congress. But I do think that this really the challenge for Republicans is that there is a populist president, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every member of the Republican conference is on board with that sort of agenda. There are still many folks very much believe in deficit. There are deficit hawks, as well as folks who want to see less government spending on some of the big entitlement programs.
Right. Tam, in just the last 30 seconds we have, I know you've been reporting on this a bit. We've mentioned Elon Musk and his influence with the White House, the incoming White House. President Trump clearly does not seem to like that. He spoke out about it yesterday at a political action conference. What do you make of this, him trying to push back at the idea that Elon Musk actually has some political sway?
Yeah, President Trump does not like people blocking his sunlight. And this is a long-standing issue that he has had, where if there is a close advisor who starts getting credit for things, he often turns on them. We don't know whether this is going to happen with Elon Musk. Right. Well, we kind of know that it's likely to happen. We don't know when it will happen or in exactly what form.
Tamara Keith and Amy Walter, so nice to see you both. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Over the last 25 years, more than 80,000 Chinese children have been adopted by U.S. families. But that has come to an abrupt halt because China announced this fall that it is bringing its foreign adoption program to an immediate end. As Stephanie Tsai reports, the futures of hundreds of Chinese children now hang in the balance.
The Welches live in Louisville, Kentucky, and are raising 4 biological sons as well as a daughter, Gracie, whom they adopted from China in 2017. But they consider themselves a family of 8. Penelope, who lives in an orphanage in China, is the missing piece. Using an international adoption agency, the Welches were matched with Penelope in 2019, when she was 5 years old. For her privacy, the Welches asked that we not show her face.
Her caregivers wanted to prepare her for the transition that was coming, and they told her that she had parents and 4 big brothers and a little sister. She received photos of us. She began to refer to us then as Mommy and Daddy, Mama and Baba.
COVID struck weeks before they were due to go to China to meet Penelope in person, finalize her adoption, and bring her back to the U.S. With China implementing one of the strictest lockdowns in the world, the trip was canceled.
Penelope's soft pink bed has been set up since Chinese New Year in January of 2020.
5 years since Penelope and the Welches were promised to each other, the little girl's bed in Kentucky still sits empty. Now 11, Amy estimates she has grown several sizes, holding the original outfit she bought for her homecoming and the new, larger one next to it. Back in China, Penelope still receives photos of the family, some printed on pillows and blankets she cuddles up to. "I love you," she says in Mandarin in a video message the orphanage sent.
It is not a perfect connection, but it is a real connection. And we think of her very much as the daughter of our hearts.
If COVID was a setback, China's announcement in September that it was ending international adoptions was a crushing blow.
So how is everyone doing?
Ever since, Amy has been organizing families in the same situation. They've been pleading their case for China to honor the pending adoptions. In Penelope's case, it was a promise made with signatures and a stamp of approval from the China Center for Children's Welfare and Adoption. The policy change has left more than 270 American families in limbo, unsure of where their adoption journey will lead. In November, U.S. lawmakers from both parties wrote a letter to President Biden, urging him to act in the best interest of these children and families by urging the PRC to fulfill and uphold the commitment the country has made. A State Department spokesperson told the NewsHour, "We deeply sympathize with the families and children, and that it's engaging with the PRC at high levels to advocate for U.S. families to be able to process their adoptions." International adoptions in China were once common. During the one-child policy, which lasted from 1980 to 2016, families abandoned or were forced to give up children, especially baby girls. Tens of thousands of babies were adopted by American families.
I was born in September of 1995. I was found by the side of a bridge, brought to the welfare home, and none of my natural relatives could be found.
Kira Omens was 10 months old when she was adopted. The 29-year-old actress now lives in Los Angeles.
How would you describe how you feel about your adoption now that you know about the one-child policy?
Adoption has impacted my life in so many different ways that I could have never anticipated. I have very loving parents. However, even so, as someone who I feel like is very well adjusted in that way, I still struggle with a lot of aspects of my adoption and the grief and the trauma that comes with being separated from your birth country, from your birth family.
Katie Lauder, now 28, was adopted just before she turned 2 by a family outside Chicago.
We grew up in a time when it wasn't really taught to adoptive parents, like how much inherent trauma there is in adoption, being separated from your first family, you know, the people that are supposed to like care about you and have some type of connection to you.
Lauder works with other adoptees who want to travel to China in search of relatives. Her own journey to discover her origins was bittersweet.
I was able to reconnect with the foster family that raised me for a year. It was a little sad because my foster mother had already passed away by the time that I was able to find the family. So that was a bit devastating because I kind of just lost the one person who knew me at the earliest point in my life.
Both Omens and Lauder had strong reactions to China's decision to end international adoptions.
I both knew that this was a step towards prioritizing family preservation, which is an element of adoption that I very much believe in and fight for. At the same time, as a woman adopted during the one-child policy, didn't necessarily feel that this decision was made purely for the betterment of children, and that also led to conflicting feelings surrounding this decision.
Like, my cohort of adoptees feel like a bit of relief and some vindication. But then there's also the other side of the community who were adopted in like the late 2000s to the 2010s. A lot of those children were medical needs or disabled children, so they have a lot of sadness around the closing of international adoptions.
Amy and Steve did not think it was in Penelope's best interest to reveal her medical condition.
We know that with her medical diagnosis, she is not a candidate for domestic adoption. It is a condition that she will live with her whole life. It's a condition that is highly stigmatized in China.
But with each passing day, Amy worries Penelope's window to be with a permanent family grows smaller.
Every single one of these 300 children, including our Penelope, has a moderate to severe special need. You know, this has been an incredibly hard wait for us and for the hundreds of other families, but what is far harder is to be an orphan, to have lost your family of origin, to grow up in institutional care.
There are more than 150,000 orphans in China, and 98% of those in state orphanages have moderate to severe disabilities or diseases. A tiny fraction of them will be adopted in China, says Yanzhang Huang, an expert on China's role in global health policy at the Council on Foreign Relations.
So clearly, there's the shortage, right, of the state capacity, right, to take care of those children. But unfortunately, right, the Chinese families, but because they would prefer adopting healthy children or minor or children with minor illness, so they don't have interest, right, in adopting these children.
In this one, a video game room.
Back in Louisville, the Welch's first Chinese adopted daughter seems as healthy as they come, despite her physical disability.
She's thriving, not because of us, like we're just ordinary parents. We're just doing what ordinary parents do.
What have you been telling Gracie? Because, from a child's perspective, she thought she had a sister coming home.
She doesn't remember a day where she wasn't waiting for Penny to come home. So nightly prayers, it's, open the door for Penny to come home. We did share with her the news in September, and there were tears all around the table as we communicated that. And we said, we're not going to give up, but we also need to be realistic that we don't control the situation. Almost done.
As a new year approaches, the Welches say all they can do is continue to speak out for Penelope, hoping someone who has the power to change the situation will hear them soon.
One missing piece.
Yay! For the PBS NewsHour, I'm Stephanie Tsai in Louisville, Kentucky.
Famed musician Arturo Sandoval was among those celebrated at the 47th Kennedy Center Honors earlier this month, which aired last night on CBS. But as a young boy in Cuba, Sandoval's rise to the top of the music world was inconceivable. He has now won 10 Grammy Awards and performed the world over. Jeff Bennett met up with Sandoval at the Pearl Street Warehouse in Washington, D.C. recently to talk about a life filled with music and paying and playing it forward. It's part of our Arts and Culture series, Canvas.
Improvisation like this is what sets Arturo Sandoval apart. Every note a story unto itself, transforming each of his performances into a one-of-a-kind masterpiece. And whether entertaining audiences huge or small, he says he aims to engage at a very emotional level.
I love because I feel when I say, man, this is so worthy, that whatever I'm saying, it's penetrating their soul, and they understand, and we communicate.
Born into a poor family in Artemisa, a small village in the province of Havana, Cuba, the 75-year-old learned early what brought him joy, enrolling in the Cuban National School of Arts and earning a place in the country's all-star national band. What was your first introduction to music growing up in Cuba?
I started banging all over, and everybody was so mad at me, my family, neighbors, everybody, because I want to play it on top of everything. But you know what's funny? Nobody in my family, before or after me, has been involved with the music in any capacity.
Really? How did music find you then?
Oh, that's a good question for God. Not for me. The only thing I can assure you that music saved my butt.
How? How did it save you?
How? Because I was a hopeless kid. I didn't see any light at the end of a tunnel because I not even could find a tunnel. And the music came and opened completely a new horizon for me, and I fall in love from the very beginning with music, man.
Is it true that when you were doing your obligatory military service,
yeah,
that you were caught listening to jazz music, which was a major offense at the time because the Cuban government called jazz the music of imperialism?
Yeah.
And you were punished for it. What do you remember about that time?
I was, as you say, I was in the obligatory military service for 3 years and 4 days. And then, as you say, they used to call the music of the Yankee imperialists.
You were in jail for 3.5 months for listening to jazz music.
That was good for me because that corroborated my desire to leave the island.
A chance meeting with Dizzy Gillespie on tour in Cuba would eventually make that possible.
They organized a kind of jam session with the Visitor and the band I was playing at that time in Cuba. When we stopped playing for them, I said, and he was looking at us and laughing and laughing. But the bottom line is, when he came back to New York, he started talking about that band that he heard in Cuba, nonstop.
At Gillespie's recommendation, the then president of CBS Records signed Sandoval to a life-changing record deal.
He put us on the plane from Havana to LaGuardia in New York. We landed there mid-afternoon. They put us in the small bus. They drove us to the sound check. We not even check in the hotel. To the sound check at Carnegie Hall.
The first time you played in the States, you played at Carnegie Hall?
You hear me wrong. Not the first time.
Yeah.
The first day ever.
It was Gillespie who became a friend, as well as mentor, who helped him defect from Cuba, along with his wife and son, while on tour with the United Nations Orchestra in 1977. What did you learn from him?
To keep your passion and love for music alive. Doesn't matter the age, or doesn't matter the fame, or doesn't matter anything. Keep that passion alive, always.
You still practice every day? You're still pushing boundaries of what you can do?
It's two ways to play music. Or you play what you want, or you play what you can. The only thing you have to do is be consistent in your practicing. Got a strong discipline and passion. You need that kind of discipline, especially with the trumpet. The trumpet is merciless. The trumpet don't give you a break, my
Merciless,
friend.
Yeah. Sandoval gained more acclaim and larger audiences as he toured worldwide with his own band and with Dizzy Gillespie.
Arturo Sandoval!
He became so popular that he played at the halftime of the 1995 Super Bowl and for the Obamas at the White House in 2012. The following year, President Obama presented Sandoval a Presidential Medal of Freedom. When did you know that music would be your life's work?
it was a process that took years, you know. And the concept that the people used to have about musicians was terrible, you know. But my decision was, how can I say, irrevocable?
Irrevocable.
Eh?
Irrevocable.
Irrevocable.
Sandoval is best known for his virtuoso playing of jazz trumpet and flugelhorn, but also for piano, timbales, vocals, and keyboard. I asked him what distinguishes jazz and Latin jazz in particular.
Jazz is synonymous of freedom. And for me, I strongly believe that freedom is the most important word in any dictionary, in any language in the world. Because no freedom, no life. And I can talk about because I know the difference between no freedom and freedom.
You know, you're a real master of technical expertise and emotional expression. How do you balance both elements?
I like the second part.
The second one, the emotional expression. Okay. Doesn't one inform the other? And I ask you this because I was listening to Mambo Caliente the other day.
Yeah.
And you hit this high C. You hit a C7 in that song. And that, to me, is technical expertise.
To play low or high is more related to the technique. But for example, to really notice a big difference between a musician who can play technically flawless and incredible, and then you have to tell them, please, play for me a simple, a slow melody, and sing with your instrument like a good singer. Because if some people play the melody, say, when I fall in love. It's different when you play an instrument. You know, to sing with an instrument.
What excites you about the future of jazz and the future of Latin music?
You know, we have to keep a hope alive, you know. Jazz has never been the music of the huge, massive audience, you know. But the real jazz fans are very special. We must protect, defend, and preserve jazz music. And I still, at 75, I still practicing every day, and I love music more every day.
Finally tonight, for more than 20 years, one street in St. Louis, Missouri is transformed every holiday season. But behind the sparkle is an underlying motivation that many believe is the true meaning of Christmas. Our community correspondent, Gabrielle Hayes, explains.
Gabrielle Hayes here on Candy Cane Lane in St. Louis, Missouri, where residents tell me that they take off nearly every Friday in the month of November to be able to hang thousands of lights, something they've been doing for more than 20 years. Has your setup grown over the years as well?
Every year, and I will not stop until you can see my house from space.
I believe the very first time it was done was 2001. Started from a neighborhood block contest, and someone had the idea on this block to wrap the big pin oak trees in the style of candy canes, and that seemed to stick.
This will be our 6th Christmas. We moved in October of 2019.
What was your first Christmas here like?
We participated. We had blow-ups, we had some lights. We did our best, and it's definitely a marathon and not a sprint.
So Matt talked about the tree that he built in his yard. Yeah, right there. How high did we put it at?
16 feet. It really takes about two really good weekends of nice weather, a lot of help,
the wrapped trees, anything overhead. Well, yeah, that's kind of the community lights that we all get together to help put up. It's more than just some lights, you know, it really pulls the whole block and beyond that community together. Anyone who is on the block, put up information about their charity, and some people donate. It's completely optional. We've been able to give well over $200,000 over the lifespan of Candy Cane Lane to various charities that you know, are really in the hearts of the people who live here and help do it all.
What is your hope that people take away from being able to experience Candy Cane Lane?
I hope they just have a great memory with whoever they may be in their car with, or their truck, or their party bus, or their trolley with. I hope they can leave this place saying, wow, when we went to that Candy Cane Lane with whoever it may be, that was really cool and I can't wait to go back.
And that is the NewsHour for tonight. I'm William Brangham. On behalf of the entire NewsHour team, thank you so much for joining us.
Major funding for the PBS NewsHour has been provided by supported by the John D. and Catherine T. MacArthur Foundation, committed to building a more just, verdant, and peaceful world. More information at macfound.org. And with the ongoing support of these institutions. This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.